DND number 2, Suffer the Children in Jesus' Name, Chapter 10. Lieutenant Varanza rose and ushered Caroline into another room. Sergeant Summers caught up to him just before he went in to question her. Sir, I've found Caroline Jones. You have? Yes, sir. She flew into LaGuardia from Atlanta just a few hours ago. I was about to have her picked up. No need. She's here. She is? Yeah, came to tell us that she killed Mancini. I was about to question her. Want to join me? Summers nodded. This should be interesting. In the room, the detective sat and asked her to state her name. Her voice trembled for just a second. My name is Caroline Jones. Okay, now, Miss Jones, I want you to tell, in your own words, what happened early on the morning of July 2nd. I couldn't sleep. Toby and I were going to go off to Nashville the next day, and I was excited, so I couldn't sleep. I got up and I went for a walk. What time did you go for a walk? She paused. She hadn't thought about times, but she knew it had to be well before Toby arrived. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. When I got back, George was in my apartment. And why was he in your apartment? He used his master key to come in whenever he wanted. And why would he want to come in? He wanted to, he wanted me. He wanted to have me. He tried before, once, and Toby caught him and beat him up pretty badly. He tried to have sex with you? Caroline's face reddened. Well, I think that's what would have happened. He hit me and jumped on top of me, and that's when Toby showed up. So, in your words, he tried to have sex with you against your will? Yes, sir. That's called rape. She looked down quickly. Yes, sir. He who? George. He was probably still mad about that, about Toby beating him up. Anyway, when I got back from my walk, he was there in my apartment. He tried to force himself on me, and I grabbed the bat that I keep by the door and hit him with it. I didn't mean to hit him so hard. I got scared and I ran, and I've been hiding ever since. And that's it? She nodded. How long was your walk? Where did you go? I went a couple of blocks up toward the hotel. I got back probably between 1:30 and 2. Lieutenant Varanza sat with his hands together as if in prayer, hitting them against his pursed lips. Have you spoken to your boyfriend? No, sir. Why not? She searched quickly for an answer. I couldn't. He was in jail. Well, he's been out on bail for 2 days. I was afraid. Of him? Is he easily agitated? No, sir, she said quickly. No, I was just afraid of the situation. But you faced your fear and came to see me today. Yes, sir. Does Toby know you're here? She hung her head. No, sir. Where have you been? I can't tell you that. Why not? I just can't. Are you protecting someone? I was staying with someone. I promised them I'd keep their name out of it. Lieutenant Varanza sighed. I see. Let's back up a second. Mr. Mancini made advances towards you, and you picked up the bat and hit him. Yes, sir. Nothing else? You didn't try to get him to leave you alone? You didn't fight with him first? I did. She finally raised her voice. Okay, I yelled at him to get out, and he grabbed me, and I tried to wrestle away. He slapped me. She was describing the previous incident, but it was good enough for her to use. I fell down, and he jumped on me, and I got away and ran to get the bat, and I pulled it back, and I swung it as hard as I could, and I hit him in the back of the head, and he fell, and I ran, and that's it. When it was clear Caroline had finished speaking, he looked over at Sergeant Summers. Booker. Summers raised his eyebrows and questioned, Sir? Varanza shrugged. Do it. He watched her as the detective ushered her out. She at least had the time of death correct. She was lying, just like Toby Nash, but doing a better job of it. Of course, she didn't know that Summers had discovered that she'd flown into Atlanta and had returned just this morning. Who were they protecting? He could have sworn that Nash was protecting her. So that means Nash really thinks she did it, only she didn't. So who did? Now that they had the forensic information, they knew the time of death was definitely set at 1:30. He doubted this little girl could swing a bat hard enough to kill a man. She's a good girl, sweet, and completely in love with Toby Nash. She'd do anything for him, that's obvious. So who's protecting who? Maybe a night in jail will make her think twice about what she's doing, and just maybe he could get the truth out of one of them. New scene. Toby's parents were in his hotel room, his father shaking him awake. Son, you better wake up and listen to this. Toby sat up sleepily as his father switched on the TV. A new twist in the case of country singer Toby Nash. Caroline Jones, the woman alleged to be having an affair with the singer, has been taken into custody and placed under arrest for the murder of George Mancini. All charges against Toby Nash have been dropped. Toby flew from the bed. No, Caroline. He charged around the room, gathering clothes, dressing as he ran. He'd told his family of the relationship with Caroline. He'd told them that he loved her and would marry her if the couple could ever get past this. Still, Joe and Ellen Smith had no idea that Toby was as blown away as he appeared to be. It took him only seconds to dress. He headed for the door, stopped, turned. His father threw him the keys to his car. Once Toby was gone, Ellen turned to her husband. Finally, our Toby is really in love. Yeah, Joe answered. Let's just hope it doesn't kill the both of them. Let's wake up Jeff and Sam and tell them about the newest development. Toby flew into the squad room, demanding to see Lieutenant Varanza immediately. Sit down, Toby, the lieutenant commanded from where he stood behind his desk. Where did you find Caroline? Sit down and lower your voice. Toby got control of himself and sat. Sorry, please, tell me. We didn't find her. She turned herself in. Oh, no. The emotion in his voice touched even the hardened detective on the other side of the desk. Toby's head snapped up. She's lying. She's lying to protect me. Varanza never batted an eye. Funny. She said the same thing about you. Well, then it's her word against mine. That's right. Only her word is a little more credible than yours. Toby ran a hand through his hair. Why? Well, her story got a little closer to the evidence than yours did. Look, I did it. You can't let her take the fall for me. Don't you want to see justice done? Varanza leaned forward. As a matter of fact, I do. I really do. And, Toby demanded, and I don't believe your story. Toby slammed his fist on the desk out of pure frustration. Can I see her? The lieutenant sat quietly, thinking. Please, sir, I need to see her. I need to talk to her and make sure she's all right. I can arrange a meeting. Toby almost wept with relief. Thank you, sir. You still got your lawyer in town? Yes, sir. She's going to need one. The statement was said with genuine concern instead of sarcasm, and had Toby taking a closer look at the lieutenant. He reminded him of his father, honest and straight. Look at the lieutenant. He reminded him of his father, honest and straightforward, and he was grateful for that. Thank you, sir, Toby said. Varanza nodded. Yeah, he said abruptly. You Southerners are way too polite. It gives me the creeps. Come on. He stood and led Toby to the room where he'd given his original statement. Wait here, he said, and left the room. Toby glanced up at the mirror. He knew they would be watched, but he didn't care. All he cared about at the moment was seeing Caroline. Arms folded across his chest, he leaned against the wall and waited. When the door opened, a tired, sad face looked up at him. The flower bloomed. Neither waited on the other to move. They charged across the room. Toby scooped her up into his arms, and Caroline wrapped her legs around his waist, and their mouths melded together. Varanza watched from behind the two-way, pulling at his collar uncomfortably as the kiss went on and on. He was relieved when Toby finally set her on her feet. His hands were touching her face, running up and down her arms, coming to rest on her shoulders. Are you okay? I'm fine. Toby took a step back and drew in a deep breath. What in the world do you think you're... I'm fine. Toby took a step back and drew in a deep breath. What in the world do you think you're doing? She raised her chin. I'm facing up to what I did. You mean what I did? I don't mean that at all. Varanza rubbed his hand over his chin. They were good. He looked over at his partner, who only shook his head. Toby grabbed her harshly. Caroline, you can't do this. I can. Please. I won't let you, Toby. This would never have happened if not for me. I won't let you throw away your life and your career because of me. It's done, Caroline. The career is over. You may as well let me go through with it. No, your career is not over. The public is already behind you again. What makes you say that? She unfastened her pants and lowered them slightly, and he glanced up at the mirror. He knows we're here, Summers muttered. Of course, but she doesn't. Toby stopped her. What are you doing? I'm trying to show you how loyal your fans are. She lowered the waistband to expose a giant bruise on her thigh. He knelt down beside her. How did that happen? A fellow prisoner kicked me. Kicked you? Why? Because I let Toby Nash go through an entire week of suffering for something he didn't do. He went right back to the lie. But I did do it. She smiled. They believe me, not you. She fastened her clothing. They believe a lie, not a lie. He pulled her into his arms again. Please, baby, let me do this. She softly mocked the words back to him, emphasizing the me. Lieutenant Varanza shook his head. Nothing. They were giving him nothing. Take her back, he ordered. Caroline looked up into Toby's eyes. In case anything happens, I want the last words you hear me speak to be this. I love you, Tobias Smith. He touched her face, and I you. The door opened. He held her tight for a second longer, and she was led from the room. Toby looked up at the mirror. Lieutenant Varanza frowned. Now what? His instincts were good, and they were telling him that these two kids had nothing to do with what happened to George Mancini. Lieutenant Varanza sat down at his desk. He would have to speak to Caroline again. She'd been in Atlanta. Why? There was more to the story. New scene. Sam was down at the courthouse in a flash, arranging bail, and by 5 the next evening, Caroline was free. Toby was there, waiting for her with open arms. Unfortunately, so was a crowd of Toby's adoring fans and the media. Excuse me, sir, one reporter worked his way in. What are your plans now? To get some rest, Toby answered flatly. Will you stand beside your girlfriend? Toby looked at the man as if he had horns. Of course. The man shrugged. It's just that some of your fans will find it difficult to accept you standing behind a woman who is a murderer and who almost let you take the fall for her. Toby looked down at Caroline's face. The tears were there, welling up in her eyes. Why wouldn't she let him do this? I'm not supposed to discuss specifics of the case with you. Now, if you'll excuse me, we're tired. He shoved Caroline inside the waiting car, and they sped back to the hotel. He showed her to her room. She frowned and stood at the door. What's wrong? I want to stay with you. He nodded slowly. Okay, but I'm not saying this so that we can mess around. I just want to be near you. His heart soared. Okay. Then does that mean we're back to where we were before Tracy messed everything up? We are, she murmured, as she wrapped her arms around his neck. I only wish I hadn't wasted so much time. I've learned time is precious. He leaned down to kiss her softly. One more day, he sang the popular country song in her ear. I thought those words over and over when you left me. All I wanted was one more day. She smiled, and now we have it. New scene. Caroline sighed as the hot water coursed over her body. She was tired, sore, and hungry, but free, at least for a while. As Toby waited in the bedroom for her, she indulged herself. Never had she thought that shampoo and soap could smell so heavenly. She watched the bubbles slide away under the running water and forced herself to step from the shower. Snuggling into a thick robe, she went in search of Toby. He was staring out at the bustling city, but turned as she emerged from the bathroom. He smiled as he looked her over. Hey, darling, feeling better? Much. I left my luggage at the diner. He nodded. I'll see about it. She sniffed the air. Something smells delicious. He turned around to show her the pizza on the table. Oh, she cried with glee. I knew I smelled something. It took only a few seconds before she was stuffing a slice in her mouth. Lord, this tastes so good. I have never had pizza this good. Where did you get it? Toby laughed. Oh, it's an old favorite called the best pizza in the world that tastes so good because you just got out of jail. She scarfed up another piece and guzzled some soft drink. I'm in heaven. He laughed because he was there in heaven with her, watching her, speaking to her, seeing her happy. Heaven. How long would it last? He watched her eat until she pushed back from the table with a soft groan. Ugh, I made a pig of myself. Aren't you going to eat? I'll get something while I'm out. She frowned. Out? I was just thinking that I need to run some errands, and I'm not sure if they'll let anyone into your apartment yet, but while I'm out, I can pick up your luggage at the diner. That would be great. In the meantime, I imagine you'd like to get some rest. I won't be long. He held out his hand. Come on, I'll tuck you in. Scrubbed, fed, and slipping between cool, clean sheets, she could immediately feel the tension leaving her body, draining away, her eyes closed in contentment. Toby leaned down and kissed her forehead. Sleep. I'll be back before you know it. He left the room, and she jumped up immediately and dialed Eugene's. Rosie? Caro, I am mad at you. You lied to me. You said you were going to go see Toby, and instead you went to the police. I'm sorry, Rosie. Please try to understand. I did what I had to do to help Toby. Oh, fine. And now who's going to help you? I'm going to be fine. Toby's lawyer can get me off on self-defense. If anything, I'll face manslaughter. If they hadn't dropped the charges against Toby, he would be facing murder charges. That's a big difference. You have to understand. I'm trying, Carol. Really, I am. Rosie, I have to ask something of you and Eugene. You're the only ones who know where I went. You can't tell anyone, not a soul. If you do, Toby might be in real trouble. I don't know, Caro. Rosie, are you my friend? Of course I am. Well, then I have to be able to trust you. Friends trust each other. Please, tell me I can trust you and Eugene to not say anything. Please, Rosie. Toby's on his way to pick up my suitcase. Talk to Eugene before it's too late. Will you have any trouble convincing Eugene to keep quiet? Oh, please. Eugene will do anything I say. Then you'll do it? Caroline pressed. There was silence. Rosie! Okay. Okay, but I don't like it, not one little bit. Caroline smiled. I'll make it up to you, I promise. Rosie vocalized as she hung up the phone. Business taken care of, Caroline snuggled up on the pillow and fell fast asleep. New scene. Take a look at that, Sergeant Summers said as he slapped the records from Caroline's phone onto the desk. Lieutenant Varanza studied them briefly and looked up. Sterling Care Nursing Home. Have you contacted them? He was nodding. The call was from a woman named Rita Warren, a nurse at the facility where Virginia Jones was a patient. Virginia Jones, a relation of Caroline Jones? Her mother. That's why Miss Jones flew to Atlanta in the middle of the night. She was in Atlanta the entire week, buried her mother on the 7th, flew back that night, in here bright and early on the 8th telling us her bullcrap story. Varanza nodded. Playing the system. The question is, why? I get really mad when people waste my time. Calm down, Carl, and think about it. Toby Nash arrives to pick up Caroline. He finds Mancini, thinks she killed him, and decides to take the rap for her. She gets home, discovers he's in jail for killing Mancini, and comes in to confess. And yet neither one of them is guilty. Why didn't Nash just tell the truth? How stupid is that? Varanza shrugged, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Love does things to a man, Carl. In some skewed way of thinking, he thought he was protecting her. Why he thought she needed protecting, I don't know. He shook his head slowly. With hardly a moment to think about it, they were willing to throw their lives away for each other. You don't see that kind of love every day. I mean, people say they love each other all the time, but not often do they prove it in such a way. You're getting to be a soft touch in your old age, Lieutenant. He frowned and straightened his shoulders. Whatever. The question remains, what happened to Mancini? Summers blew out a breath. I'm thinking accidental death. He was drunk. He could have slipped and hit his head. Varanza nodded. Went there looking for Caroline, got a little crazy when he found her gone, broke up the place and slipped in his drunken stupor. Right? And Nash confesses because he doesn't know where Caroline is, even though I'm not sure why she didn't try to let him know where she'd gone. So he thinks she's killed Mancini and taken off. There's a history. Mancini roughed her up at least once before. The logical conclusion. Captain wants to see you guys. Varanza nodded at the officer who delivered the message. Well, let's see how the story stands with the boss. They found him staring through the slats of the mini blinds. He turned as they entered. Have a seat. Both Varanza and Summers sat and waited while the captain pressed 2 fingers to his forehead, drew a deep breath, and sighed. I just got off the phone with the mayor's office. Seems people are out for blood. They want to make sure there's no special treatment just because this Toby Nash guy is a celebrity. We've been ordered to come down hard, so tell me what's the status on the case. Or there's nothing and no one to come down on, Varanza stated. Both Nash and his girlfriend are innocent. Alibis? Strong. They weren't even in the state when Mancini died. Go on. The lieutenant took a few minutes to fill him in on the story, while the captain listened with raised eyebrows. Finally, Varanza concluded. The two threw us off by confessing to killing Mancini, but now that we know the truth, we're thinking accidental death. The public is not going to buy that. Well, they'll have to, won't they? I don't care what the mayor says. We are not going to roast a couple of innocents. Of course not. He frowned. Still, they lied to us, and when the public finds that out, supposing they don't already know, they're going to want retribution for it. What are you saying, Captain? You want me to bring these kids up on obstruction charges? We're not even sure a crime has been committed. Make the arrests. These kids were trying to protect each other. I understand that. Look, I got a lot of people to smooth over. Make the arrest. We'll find a way through the maze that won't cause too much damage to any of the involved parties. We have to make sure we don't appear to be playing favorites because Nash and Miss Jones are celebrities. Think about it, Lieutenant. If this were some kid off the street who lied to protect his friend, we'd be tough on him. Varanza blew out of breath. Maybe, depending on whether the friend was guilty or innocent. But be honest, you know as well as I we can't and don't arrest everyone who has ever lied to the police. Well, we will in this case. End of discussion. New scene. Caroline didn't open her eyes again until morning. She peeked up at the clock beside the bed, 9:30. She sat up quickly. 9:30? In the morning? Hello there, sleepyhead. Toby sat in a wing chair watching her. He stood, freshly showered, shaved, and dressed in khaki slacks and a polo shirt. He looked like a GQ advertisement. She found her heart beating faster as he approached the bed. Good morning, she answered. I can't believe I slept through the entire night and half the morning without waking up. You were exhausted, and with good reason. Where did you sleep? She asked. Right beside you, darling. She frowned and patted the bed. Oh, do I get a morning kiss? She asked coyly. You most certainly do, he murmured as he knelt on the bed by her. She sighed in pleasure as he kissed her. I love you so much, she whispered. I'm so sorry I let that Tracy person get into my head. He nodded with a sigh. I remember a Sunday school teacher once saying that Satan is very good at what he does. I didn't understand. How can a thing so evil be called good, you know? Well, Tracy's one of those people who's very good at deception, and I can see how her being good at something bad can cause a great deal of destruction. Caroline nodded. So, you do remember some of the stuff you learned going to church? He smiled. I'm beginning to remember, thanks to you. You got me thinking about the person I thought I was compared to the person I'd become. The person my father is, whom I always wanted to emulate, compared to who I was, well, it was a big stretch. The day you left me, I got on my knees and started praying, and it took a while, but I slowly started to feel the door open, and I realized that much of my adult life I'd pretty much turned my back on God, but He didn't turn His back on me. And now look, here you are, safe and sound, right here with me. Caroline smiled sweetly, and I'm pretty grateful for that. But something you said kind of bothers me. What? It's about Tracy. I mean, you as good as compared her to the devil. Well, as far as I'm concerned, she's evil. Caroline shook her head. She was desperate, afraid of losing the most amazing man. I can't really blame her for that. Bless her heart. Yeah, what she did, lying to break us up, that was bad, but I forgive her. If I did something really bad, I'd hope that person would forgive me. Toby shook his head in wonder. He thought maybe she was talking about her having to kill Mancini. You're doing it again. What? You're teaching me how to be a better man. You, the one who says she doesn't know about God, are the one closest to His light. She shrugged. I just know that there are things I've done in my life that I'm not proud of, and I hope I'm not considered evil. And by the way, it's not that I don't know about God, because my mom talked about Him all the time. She just never took me to church, and I wasn't sure if He was real. You're using the past tense to say that. Does that mean your thoughts have changed? She shrugged. Maybe they are changing. Well, as much as I'd love to continue this conversation, we have to get a move on. Hop up and get dressed. Why? She whined. Because my family is gathered 2 doors down, waiting for us to have breakfast with them. She frowned. Your family? They're looking forward to seeing you again. Her eyebrows rose in trepidation. I don't want to do this now, Toby. I'm not ready. He patted her leg. Everything will be okay. They love you. Oh, sure. They love the girl who totally messed up their son's life, sent him to jail for murder. Oh, and let's not forget ruined his brilliant career. They love the girl their son has fallen in love with. Why don't we stay here and you show me some of that love? He rose, clapped his hands together. As good as that sounds, there's no time, darling. Make time, she insisted. They're waiting as we speak. She rose to her knees and reached out to him. How about one more kiss? He obliged her. However, one kiss led to 2 and 3, and it was several minutes before he pulled away. Oh, man, Caroline, what am I going to do with you? Whatever do you mean? First, you helped me to be a better Christian. Then the next thing I know, you're tempting me almost beyond my ability to resist. Are you mad about me making you late for breakfast? His brow creased. Lord, you made me completely forgot. We got to go. Get dressed. Mom is going to be either worried or mad, and Dad is going to know why we're late. She giggled as she ran into the bathroom. Oh, poor little Toby. I got him in trouble. He smiled. I will get you back. Luckily, it didn't take Caroline long to get ready. They walked hand in hand to the suite. Toby opened the door and ushered her inside. The room was much larger than theirs, with a dining area, formal living room, and a bedroom off to each side. Wow, Caroline uttered as she entered. Toby's family sat around a beautifully laid table, covered with an amazing buffet. His mother rose immediately. Toby, what took you so long? We started to come after you. Caroline glanced in Toby's father's direction, and he was smiling. She blushed. Toby's mother turned to Caroline. This just can't be the same little girl that came to visit all those years ago, she exclaimed. Hello, Caroline said softly. Hello, nothing. You give me a hug, Ellen insisted. Caroline did. The woman was the same, maybe a bit older, but the same. Dark hair, deep blue eyes, and still as overbearing as ever. Mr. Smith greeted Caroline next, telling her she'd grown into a beautiful young lady, and Jeff moved close to give her a kiss on her cheek, and Sam nodded from his place by the window, and Caroline finally turned to the 2 youngest people in the room. Molly? A lovely young girl smiled and came to take Caroline's hand. She looked more like her father, while Toby resembled his mother. Molly had curly red hair and green eyes and a sprinkling of freckles across her nose. I suppose you don't remember me, Caroline began. Sure I do. It was probably the most fun New Year's Eve I've ever had. I remember you telling us scary stories and stealing Cokes, and I remember you hitting your head. We've talked about that night many times. Really? Caroline asked, stunned. Sure. And we used your scary stories later at sleepovers and played hide and seek in the dark all the time. Caroline looked up at Toby, her eyes moist. He smiled at her, brushed his hand over her cheek. Do you remember me? A handsome young man asked as he approached. He resembled Toby, only his hair was lighter and he wasn't quite as large. She smiled at him. You're the mean one. The family laughed as Ben held his hands to his heart as if stricken. I was hoping you wouldn't remember that. Can you ever forgive me? I was only teasing, she said with a smile. Besides, there's nothing to forgive. You were only a child. The large group sat around the table eating bagels and sweet rolls and fruits and omelets and bacon and sliced Polish sausages. Caroline laughed as they told her stories about Toby and Jeff and some of their misadventures and thrilled at the accomplishments of Molly and Ben. She was surprised to learn that Toby graduated from the University of Tennessee with a degree in music. You've all done so much with your lives, Caroline commented. Well, you've accomplished quite a bit yourself, Toby assured her. Not hardly. He looked up to address his family. Let me tell you about this lady. She wanted to be a dancer, but things at home were not optimum. They barely had enough money to buy food, much less pay for dance lessons. So she went to her local library and studied books on dance. You know, the ones with pictures of dancers in the different positions and stuff. She practiced and practiced, and when she felt she looked enough like a real dancer, she went to a local dance school and asked for a scholarship. They granted her an audition, and the teacher was so impressed with what she taught herself that she not only offered her a scholarship, She gave her private lessons. And that was only the beginning. That instructor was so impressed with Caroline's dedication and perseverance that she rewarded her by talking to an old friend, Madame Pierre, who owns the New York School of Dance. Caroline became Madame Pierre's protege and an accomplished dancer. You should see her dance, Mom. It will bring tears to your eyes. Oh, stop, Toby, Caroline said, embarrassed. She leaned toward Toby's mother. I'm not that good. He's biased. You'll see, Toby assured them. Anyway, now Madame Pierre has offered Caroline a position as lead ballet instructor at her school. It's a very prestigious position and highly respected. Ellen Smith smiled genuinely. That's wonderful, Caroline. You have accomplished a great deal. Caroline's eyes met Toby's. His glowed with so much pride. Everyone was being so nice to her, she thought, and so polite. No one spoke of the trouble that hung over her head. Okay, Toby, Ben said, as if reading her thoughts. I have to ask a question. Ben, Ellen said, her voice issuing a warning. It's okay, Mom, Toby soothed. Let's get this talked about so we can move on. Well, we would all like to know the answer, Toby, so which is it? Did you really kill this Mancini guy and Carol's covering for you? Or did Carol do it and you were taking the rap for her? The couple looked at each other briefly. I did it, they claimed in unison. Come on now, Ben pleaded. We're family. You can tell us. Toby looked at his father. They'd had a long talk, and his father was the only one who knew Toby really didn't do it and was covering for Caroline. That was the way Toby wanted it, and that's the way it would be. I've told you the story, and that's the end of it, Toby stated firmly. But all eyes turned to Caroline. She smiled nervously. Toby is trying to protect me. She's lying, Toby insisted. Okay, I get it, Ben gave in. The knock at the door gave finality to the conversation. Jeff rose to answer it. Two uniformed officers stood in the threshold along with a female officer. You Toby Nash? One asked. No, sir. Jeff turned to the family. Toby was rising. They all were rising. I'm Toby. The officers entered the room and approached him. We have a warrant for your arrest. I'm afraid we're going to have to ask you to turn around and place your hands on the wall. I don't understand, Toby began. One of the officers grabbed Toby by the arm. You don't have to understand. Just do as you're told. Toby shook him off. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake. May I see the warrant? Sam asked. The officer handed him the papers. Caroline found her voice. There must be a mistake. He's had all charges dropped. The female officer addressed her. Are you Caroline Jones? Caroline nodded. Face the wall, please, the officer demanded. Caroline's mouth dropped open. But why? I'm out on bond. The male officer who just finished cuffing Toby took Caroline by the shoulders and turned her toward the wall. Toby moved forward. Don't hurt her. The officer laid a hand on Toby's shoulder. Step back. Once cuffed, Caroline turned to look up at Toby. His eyes met hers. There was fear there, and he hated that. He looked around at his family. They were devastated, all but his father, who was calm. He was grateful for his father's quiet strength. I don't understand, Joe, Ellen said softly. The charges were dropped, at least for Toby they were, and Caroline's bond was legally set, right? Sam, Toby said, looking to his lawyer for answers. You're being arrested for obstruction of justice. One officer opened the door. Let's go. This is ridiculous, Toby muttered. The female officer ushered Caroline through the door, and Toby was right behind. Joe Smith looked around at the shocked faces of his family. Everything will be fine. Toby's a big boy. He can take care of himself. Oh, yeah, Ben retorted. He's been doing a fine job of that. What does that mean exactly? Jeff asked. Obstruction of justice. Sam sighed. My assumption is they've discovered that either Toby or Caroline, or possibly both, are lying. Well, we know one of them is lying, Ben said. But the way they came in and arrested them like they were criminals, Ellen said, that seemed a little strong, don't you think? Well, that's bullcrap cop stuff, Jeff said angrily. Oh, sorry, he nodded at Mrs. Smith. More than likely, someone was furious when they discovered the lie and decided to teach them a lesson. Well, I think this stinks. This really just stinks, Molly said bitterly. Well, Sam, Joe said, time to go to work. New scene. The arresting officer stopped by the squad room and sat their prisoners down on a bench just outside the door. "Stay put," the larger officer ordered. He and the female officer went through the door to speak with the lieutenant. "We've got your prisoners. You want to speak to them now, or you want us to park them?" Lieutenant Veranda looked out the window to the couple sitting on the bench. The man was enraged. The woman was terrified. His eyes met those of Toby Nash. Veranda let him know with a glance that he was onto them. The younger man lost some of his arrogance. Veranda returned his gaze to the officers. "Oh, we've got a homicide on 53rd. It won't hurt those two to sit and stew for a couple of hours." "You got it." Veranda watched as they moved the couple to a cell. He shook his head with a sigh. They were good kids. He stopped and corrected himself. They weren't kids at all. New scene. Toby thought he would go crazy when Caroline was separated from him. It crushed him to see the fear on her face, only he was about to face his own fear. "Well, well, well, I got my celebrity back after all," Mac taunted. "Well," Toby jeered right back, "if it isn't my good friend Mac. You miss me?" "Been no fun without you here," Mac admitted as he playfully smacked Toby in the back of the head with his club. Toby's vision went blank for an instant, and he felt suddenly sick. He'd received several blows over the last few days and held up pretty well, but that last one broke him. He realized this particular time Mac hadn't even been trying to inflict any damage. The pop to the back of his head had been almost in sport. Yet this time Toby became dizzy, nauseated, and he sincerely hoped he wouldn't be there long enough for Mac to get the chance to torture him any further. He sank down on the hard seat, thoughts of the beatings Caroline had endured during her life flashing through his mind. He thought she'd probably been through worse than what he'd faced lately. Her mother had actually knocked her unconscious a few times. He would have thought that it wouldn't bother him at all to be smacked around, yet it was bothering him. Besides fueling his temper, it made Caroline's life seem much more real. He laid there gratefully motionless for almost 3 hours before Mac came to get him. Mac hadn't bothered him the entire time. Maybe the man knew just when to stop, just before the signs of abuse were evident. "Lieutenant wants to see you," Mac said. Caroline sat on the floor of the holding cell, cross-legged, rocking back and forth. No one bothered her. No one spoke to her, and she was glad. She had to think. Why had they arrested her and Toby again? Had they found evidence that actually linked her to the crime? Was her stepping forward going to backfire on Toby? Had she done more damage than good? Not knowing was driving her mad, and she was relieved when she was finally sent for. They led her to the interrogation room, and her heart leapt when Toby appeared beside her. Lieutenant Veranda nodded at them. "Have a seat." Toby swallowed as he and Caroline settled themselves. What kind of game was about to take place? Caroline looked apprehensively up at the lieutenant. "You know why I brought you in?" My lawyer says obstruction of justice." "Do you understand the charge?" "Yes." "No." Veranda directed his remarks to Caroline, who'd given the negative answer. "It seems we've discovered that you lied to us and have intentionally misdirected the investigation into the death of George Mancini." The room was silent except for Toby's somewhat labored breathing. "Anyone have anything to say?" The lieutenant gave them a full minute to speak before he took over. "Fine. Then we'll do it this way." He walked away and turned abruptly. "We've had some new facts presented to us on the case," Veranda began. Caroline glanced over at Toby. He seemed angry. Of course he was, she thought. He'd been free, all charges dropped, and now he had to go back to facing who knows what. "We're going to go over what happened again, Caroline." "She needs her lawyer present," Toby snapped. "We can wait for him," the lieutenant stated. "Do you want to wait, Miss Jones, or would you rather get this over with?" Nervously, she glanced at Toby. His face seemed pale. He had sweat on his upper lip, and his eyes bore into hers. "Wait," he demanded. "That's fine. We can wait, though there's no telling how long it will be before I have time to speak with you again." "That's bull," Toby muttered. Caroline spoke quickly before Toby got himself into more trouble than he was already in. "Let's just get this over with. You already know everything anyway." "We'll see about that. So let's start at the beginning." She nodded, licking her lips. "You were sleeping?" "Yes, sir." "Then what happened?" She cleared her throat and took a deep breath. She was confused and not quite sure what to say or not to say. "I woke up." "Why?" "Why?" she repeated. "Did you hear something?" "No, sir. I just couldn't sleep. I was anxious about the next day." Anxious because you and Toby were going on a trip. Yes, sir. Is this really necessary? Toby asked through clenched teeth. She's already told you her story. Lieutenant Veranza turned on him. You two are in trouble, and I gave you a chance to come clean, and I'm not the enemy. I want to help you. Toby realized the man probably knew the truth now. He probably knew the time of death and the fact that he'd come in on an early morning flight. For some reason, he couldn't bring himself to fess up and just leave Caroline hanging out to dry. That, combined with the fact that he wasn't feeling well enough to think clearly, kept him from responding. Veranza turned back to Caroline. You couldn't sleep, and I went for a walk down. You couldn't sleep, and I went for a walk down toward the hotel and back. It took about 20 minutes, and when I got back, George was there. We scuffled. I hit him with the bat. He fell, and I ran. End of story. What time, Caroline? Time? What time did you wake up? About 1:30. No, I mean about 1 o'clock. Try again, the lieutenant demanded. You were sleeping. Her voice began to shake. I was sleeping, and I woke up, and I went for a walk, and then came back. George was there. He hit me. I hit him with the bat. Tell me again, he demanded. Is there any point to this? Toby dared to ask. You want to tell your version? Lieutenant Veranza momentarily shifted directions. Yeah, sure. I got to her apartment at 5. She wasn't there. George was. We fought. I hit him with the bat. Veranza dismissed the statement without a word and turned back to Caroline. Where were you, Caroline, when Toby was killing George? I was in... She stopped and shook her head. I was sleeping. You were sleeping while Toby was killing George? No, Toby didn't kill George. I was sleeping. He raised his voice. And then what? A tear escaped and made its way over her cheek. I couldn't sleep, and I walked. Where did you walk, Caroline? Did you dress first, or were you sleeping in your clothes? I was sleeping. I know that. And then what? I went for a walk. Start from the beginning, please, and tell me everything. Tell me what time, what you wore. Did you get a shirt out of your dresser, your closet, or your suitcase? Which one? Out of my... Start over from the beginning. The tears were now coursing down her cheeks. I was sleeping, and I woke up about 12:30. 12:30? Just a few minutes ago you said it was 1. She wiped her nose on the back of her hand. I meant 1. You're confusing me. You're confusing yourself. Start from the beginning, please. She sniffed. I took a walk. I was sleeping, and I woke up. What time did the phone ring? About 12. She stopped. I didn't say the phone rang. You didn't say it, but it did, didn't it? She looked at Toby. Did I say something about the phone? He shook his head. It's okay, baby. It's okay. Did you answer the phone, Caroline? No, there was no phone call, she sobbed. When it rang, did you think it was Toby calling you? Yes. No. I didn't know. Toby put his arm around her. Stop this. Can't you see you're upsetting her? Well, does that bother you, Toby? Maybe if you come clean, it would help her. Maybe you're the one causing all the pain. I don't know what you mean. Caroline, who was on the phone? Who called you at 12:30? She was shaking her head. No. It was Ms. Warren from the nursing home, wasn't it? She looked up, surprised. Tell the truth, Caroline. You'll feel so much better. Wasn't it Ms. Warren? She found herself nodding her head. And what did she tell you, Caroline? What did she say? Caroline spoke between great gasps. She said my mother was dying. And that is the end of chapter 10.